Hello and welcome to EEXSport Talk. I am your host, Gift C Enyadike Jr., here back again with my father, the legendary journalist, sports analyst, and businessman, Emeka Enyadike. And today, I owe someone an apology, a public apology, a formal apology, an apology that may actually hurt me physically to deliver. Mikel Arteta. You see, I was familiar with your game. That's the problem. I knew exactly what your game was, which is why I underestimated Arsenal Football Club. For months, years, you talked about the process, trust the process, believe the process, respect the process. And every year, Arsenal would come close and then finish second again and again and again until now. Because for the first time since 2004, Arsenal are the Premier League champions. 22 years. An entire generation of football fans has grown up without seeing the Gunners lift a league title. And now they're one game away from winning something bigger, the Champions League Final. Arsenal, PSG, Budapest, Saturday, 30th of May 2026. And history is guaranteed either way. Arsenal, they're chasing their first ever Champions League title. PSG are trying to become the second ever club in the modern Champions League era to successfully defend the trophy after Real Madrid. So, Dad, let's talk about it.
You haven't apologized to Mikel, have you? You only said
I
you.
just did.
No, that's not how to apologize. You have to properly
right.
apologize. I apologize to
All right.
Arsenal fans.
No, I will. Mikel Arteta, sir, you and your team. I am indeed sorry. I am sorry for the bottling jokes. I am sorry for begging Pep Guardiola to stop your dream from coming true. Congratulations truly to you and your team. You absolutely deserve it. Arsenal fans, you're still delusional. Bukayo Saka is nowhere near Messi. No, I'm not saying anything to you. So, no.
Maybe he scores a hat trick in the finals against PSG, and then you change your mind.
Maybe. But yeah, let's talk about it for real. Arsenal, like I said, 22 years without a league title, 3 consecutive second place finishes. Now they're finally the champions. How significant is this achievement in the context of Arsenal's history?
I think it's a massive achievement, and I will say congratulations to Mikel Arteta in particular, and to all the Arsenal faithful. Congratulations. This was a long time in coming. They have been long-suffering fans. They've been the butt of jokes. They've been the bottling company for a long time. And the worst part of it is, coming second 3 seasons in a row. I thought at the beginning of the season, that was very strategic, him and his management and the leadership of the club, in terms of the players that they signed. They definitely had something which cost them severally in the last few years, which is they had cover for every position. And they managed to get the British easy. They got Noni Madueke. They were smart. Noni Madueke actually left the World Club, the Club World Cup, right in the middle of it to sign for Arsenal. And he's got a good season because whenever Saka was injured, he was there. When Odegaard was injured, we had him. And then they had Kai Havertz who came back. So this was a very significant moment. And much more significant is the fact that when Arsenal built that stadium, they had a period when Wenger was there when they didn't invest in players. They were rather getting the young boys from the academy upwards because they had spent so much money to build that stadium. Yes, they did get a good deal with Emirates, which has helped them to recoup for a while. And then their fan base has grown tremendously, especially around Africa. They've got a massive fan base. I mean, when I was hosting the UEFA Champions League campaign for Heineken in the first season when they were sponsors in 2006, which is actually 20 years ago. And this was 2 years after Arsenal Invisibles had won everything. I know how shocked I was at just the sheer volume of Arsenal fans. But I've seen over the years, especially with the kind of work that we do with Mario in terms of tracking the fan base with Result Sports and Digital Sports Africa, we've seen the Arsenal fan base grow tremendously across the continent and around the world. So with that growth came the agony. because every year they became the loudest fans. And I have a lot of friends. I have a lot of friends, especially a lot of my mates from Port Harcourt. It's a big shock with some of the people that have suddenly become Arsenal fans. But I knew whenever, even if they were not football fans, talk less of being Arsenal fans. And I remember Henry Nelson from a Nigerian top banker who, back in the days in VGC, him and his kids who wear the Arsenal shirt. I could count how many of my friends were Arsenal fans. You know, Katie in Canada. There's a lot of people that don't stand where Eli tags me every time on Facebook. There's so many of them. And the thing is, finally they won. And the most ridiculous thing I heard was from an Arsenal fan in Abuja who said, just when the Arsenal fan, she didn't pay for cab. She got a free ride. Another guy got a free haircut. Someone else got free meals at a very expensive restaurant just when there's night shift. People were offering to pay for him. And this is how basic it is in terms of how happy the Arsenal fan base are, and they've been loud. I mean, they had a huge celebration on Saturday, and they had massive artists, Odumodu Black, who's a big artist, who's got a song about Declan Rice, by the way. He was actually playing at that concert, which was a celebratory concert. And on a weekend when the Nigerian Premier League was ending, here was a massive group of Arsenal fans celebrating the win of a club several miles away on an island off the coast of Europe, and they didn't care what was happening in the local league. So it's, and for said in the last show, this was good that we go into the next season with Arsenal as champions, and who knows, maybe they become champions of Europe as well. And then you suddenly have Arsenal. Pep Guardiola has left Man City. Will Man City become the struggling team? Liverpool has had their terrible season now. And Man United has seen a resurgence under Carrick. Will he be retained? And then suddenly you
West Ham are gone.
They're gone.
Tottenham just barely made it through. Yeah.
But they did survive. The reality is, how you will know the significance of this is to see if we see the start of a dynasty where Arsenal finally have gotten it. Can they sustain it? That's, when Wenger won the league the first time in 90 years, people were wondering if he will ever repeat it. He did in 2002, and that was a very close battle with United. And then he did again in 2004, so he won 3 titles. Mourinho came in, won it in 2004, repeated the following season. And ever since, no one else has done it. So it will be interesting. And they're not losing. I haven't heard of them losing any player. So maybe Arteta, because Arteta is very intense. Him and the Atletico Madrid kids coach, they have maybe something about the Spanish people from, or the guys from that region. They have a massive intensity and how they prepare their teams. Diego Simeone is Argentine. He's been with Atletico Madrid so long, I think they have that mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah, long answer for.
Let's actually talk about Arteta.
For the short question.
Yeah, long. Let's talk about Arteta though. He took over in 2019. I was seeing people as recently as the late stages of last month. There were calls for him to be sacked. There were fans who wanted him gone. They were like, "Man, if he doesn't win it this time, get him out of there." So now he's won Arsenal's first league title in more than 2 decades. So do you think this is one of the greatest managerial rebuilds we've ever seen in modern English football?
I think he deserves a lot of credit because, look, he's come second to City in 2 seasons. But the last 3 seasons, he's come second, which means he came very close. And there were points in those seasons where Arsenal were leading, and somehow they have a tendency to kind of have these rough periods in February where they kind of drop some points. And it did happen a bit this season, where they had a bleed twice. Even not too long, they had this period where they dropped some points, and City unfortunately couldn't match their usual past records. And then, of course, I think the shock for Arteta was them losing the title to Liverpool when City was struggling, and suddenly Klopp leaves. So I think Arteta got kind of complacent because he thinks, even from the beginning of the season when Liverpool were doing very well, he kind of wrote it off like, okay, no, it's something that wouldn't last. But somehow Slot kept Liverpool on the straight and narrow, and they just ran away with it. There was a point in that season where Arteta was hyped, and he's like, they're gonna falter. And what he forgot was that Liverpool team probably were primed to win the league in Klopp's last season until Klopp announced he was leaving.
Yeah.
And somehow the boys kind of lost their way. But I think they just had a moment.
They gave up by the end.
Yeah, they had a moment where Slot came in and they didn't change the team. They only signed Chiesa, who barely played. So it was the same team, and somehow Slot was able to keep them organized. So credit to Arteta. I mean, he's got what he's achieved, because if you award points for coming second 3 seasons in a row to now, his win record to be up there puts him right very high up in the rankings for greatest managers in the Premier League era. It's just that he's not charismatic. So sometimes people kind of think that he's not doing much. Yeah, we've got to give him credit. He is like an old teacher, who doesn't come to play, doesn't play with his kids, with his students. He wants them to have high marks. So he's on them like round the clock. You see him, the intensity, in a way, sometimes, people always accuse him of overthinking, and, and that costs him sometimes, because he makes certain judgments with the selections. And then the worst part is that when you see him on the touchline, he's very tensed up, he's not relaxed. So the players are playing and they look at him, and he's like, you can't make a mistake. So players sometimes don't express themselves so well. But we saw this season where he had learned something, and somehow he managed the difficult moments. And I have to give him credit. I'll be honest, I've been a big critic of Arteta for some years, but something changed this season, and I must say that.
Yes, absolutely. Now let's do the switch up to PSG. Last year, they finally broke through and won the Champions League in dominant fashion, by the way. And this year, they're back in the final again. How impressive is that, considering how many great teams have won the competition once and just never got back?
Luis Enrique, I knew him as a player. He's one guy who was a phenomenal player for Real Madrid and for Barcelona. And, as a coach, I still remember 2014-15 season when he was coach of Barcelona, and they won the whole team. He got his team playing. I mean, he was the one that was coach when they had Neymar, Suarez, and Messi. I mean, they were called the MSN, Messi, Suarez, and Neymar. And I went to the semifinals, and then I went to the 2 semifinals, which were both games were played in Spain. And he had that team, which was a team of superstars, and that team was built around those stars. And then he came to PSG. And when he came to PSG, both Neymar and Messi were there, and he was an Mbappe. And he's done a complete switchover where it's like, he let them go and he built his team. Funny enough, even the Barcelona team, because that team had been built on from Pep's time all the way. And so, he had all of those star players in the team, but they played as a unit. And those are the ethos that he's brought into PSG, where he's built the team around the core values of the team, where it's not, where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's not just about the star players. Yes, Dembele sometimes pops up somewhere and does something magical. The Georgian winger, there are a lot of individual talent in that team. Bakola, Doué, Kravas, Scheller. They've got Vitinha. They've got Marquinhos. They've got players in that team that step up sometimes, but it's how he gets them to work as a unit. That's one thing that it doesn't matter who's on the pitch. Sometimes he can pull some guys out and bring some other guys in, and they kind of work as a unit. So they become very difficult to beat because they maintain a certain level of consistency. Whether they are under pressure or they are dominating, they play the same way. They keep the ball. They deny you space. They attack as an army. They defend like the Roman legion. And the thing with them is that they kind of know how to play against English teams. Now, the challenge for Arteta is, does he go ultra defensive in that game and try to drag this game on and see if he can find something? Because the one thing that Arsenal has going for them is their ability to hit teams with set pieces, which,
Yes.
there
Corner
was a
FC,
game
that's what they
against,
call them.
the game against West Ham where they considered a goal and VAR after taking 6 minutes. That was the moment they won the title. Ruled out West Ham goal. Now PSG and Enrique, they are a tactical enemy. They will come up with a plan that will be difficult for Arsenal. By the way, they played Arsenal in the previous season in the semis. And they played Aston Villa, they played Liverpool, this season again. So it's going to be a very interesting final. But, Arsenal is going to come into that game with the confidence. They're Premier League champions now. It's a different feeling when you know that you've won something and you're going into that game as champions. Remember, they got into the Champions League not as champions. Now they are going into these finals as champions. PSG has won it. PSG might want to do what Real Madrid did when Ronaldo was there, when they won it back-to-back for 3 years. They might want to pull that off. So it's going to be a very, very interesting game, and it will be very tactical. I don't know which Arteta will show up on that day. Whether it's the PSG Arteta, who's always overthinking, or it's the Arteta that we saw in the last couple of games where he's managed the team very well. And maybe now that he's a champion, he's also going to go in there with the champion mindset, because this is the first time he's done it.
Mindset. Yeah.
But Enrique, on the other hand, is a serial winner, so he knows what to do. Yeah. And that's what makes this game will be one. It will be one on the bench.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to my earlier point, so officially only 8 clubs have ever successfully defended the European Cup or Champions League. We mentioned Real Madrid, Benfica, Inter Milan, Ajax, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Nottingham Forest, and AC Milan. Yeah. Yeah. So how difficult is it? Genuinely, how difficult is it really to win it twice in a row? And where would this, Enrique, his men, where would they rank historically if they managed to do it? Like, where would we put them?
So, the good thing is that I'm a good student of the Champions League, even from the era when it was the Champions Cup. I remember back in the day when I used to work in the gas project, LNG project, and I had this bunch of European bosses that I had then who would sit down and have conversations. And one day my boss said, I know he wasn't born then, but let's have a conversation about the 50s and 60s. So the Champions League, usually the teams that you've mentioned who have won it over time, they usually the teams that you call the dynastic teams, the teams that build towards dynasty. In the time of Real Madrid, they had support from the government. I mean, that was the team of General Franco. Barcelona were near there. And then you had Benfica at the peak of their power when they had Eusebio. So usually when they build a team, they have Benfica, Eusebio, they had Mario Colon. And then you had some teams that had moments like Man United. Man United in 58, they were on course for their first title, then they had a plane crash. And then it took them 10 years to win it in 68 with a team that they classified as the Lisbon Lions. Of course, they couldn't repeat the next year, even though they had Dennis Law, George Best, and Bobby Charlton. The turn of in the 70s, early 70s, Feyenoord won it in 70. And then you had this Ajax team that had Johan Cruyff and the coach Renus Michels. They had Johan Neeskens, they had Ruud Krol, they had all kinds of the players who will become the Dutch team that got to do World Cup finals in 74 and 78. So they had this period where they won back-to-back for 3 years, 71, 72, 73. Ajax won it before Cruyff went to Barcelona. And then Bayern Munich, who won the World Cup in 74, beating Ajax. Bayern Munich won it for 3 years in a row. They had 76, 74, 75. And then Liverpool came on board. That Liverpool team had a transition from the legendary Shankly onto Bob Paisley, and they had lost Keegan, who had gone to England. And then you had this scenario where Kenny Dalglish had come on. But before Dalglish came, the last season of Keegan, they won the title against the German team, Borussia Mönchengladbach. And then Keegan went off to Hamburg in Germany, but they brought in Dalglish, and they had a repeat in '78, and Liverpool won it. And then something significant happened. Nottingham Forest, who had won the league in '78, went and won the Champions Cup in '79. And then they had a repeat. They bought the first £1 million player, Trevor Francis. They also bought Nigerian UK star Justin Fashion, who's older brother of John Fashion. And they won it. Francis scored in one of those finals, and then John Robertson scored in the second final, and Forest won it back to back, 79 and 80. And then there was a moment where through that period, in the 80s, it was Aston Villa winning in 82, Hamburg winning in 83, and Liverpool coming back to winning in 84. Liverpool would have won back-to-back 84, 85. And then 85 was when they had the famous Jesus disaster. And then they lost 1-0 to Mikel Platini's goal. And in that 85, and then they got banned after the riots that had 39 fans dying in Brussels that day. English teams were banned from Europe. Otherwise, probably Liverpool would have dominated that whole era because they just had a system that worked for them. But then AC Milan got bought over by TV mogul, who became the Italian Prime Minister, Silvio Berlusconi. And then he went Dutch shopping. He had this Dutch players that he bought, Ruud Gullit, Marco van Basten, Frank Rijkaard. And then they built a dynasty. And they won back-to-back in 9 and 90. 89, they won 4-0. And then the next year, they won 1-0. And it was the Dutch guys scoring the goals. And then 91, they lost on penalties to Red Star Belgrade. And in 92, and Cruyff's Barcelona, he had started building another dynasty. He got all of this really amazing team. They had Romario. The final piece of the puzzle was getting Stoichkov, who maybe should have won the Ballon d'Or that season. Led them to win in 91. Everyone thought that was another dynasty where they could win back-to-back, but they got knocked out in 93. And that 93, Milan got to the finals again. But they lost. So, this was AC Milan could have had a period of dominance like Ajax and Bayern, but then they lost in the finals to Olympique Marseille. And then Marseille got banned because of some issues that they had. And then 94, Milan was in the finals again. This time around, when they won those ones, by this time they had Fabio Capello as coach. Carlo Ancelotti, who was a famous Champions League winner, Serie A winner, was he was Milan team that won in 89 and 90. So by the time they got to 94, it was Barcelona against AC Milan in the finals. And everyone thought, okay, now Barcelona will reclaim their beat. And, Romario was on fire. His partnership with Stoichkov was still very good. Milan had players injured in that finals. They had Costa Curta suspended. They had Baresi injured. And they brought in Filippo Galli, who hadn't played the entire season, and moved Paolo Maldini to centre back. And they beat Barcelona 4-0. That's like the biggest shock in the Champions League finals. So think about it. AC Milan got to the finals like 5 or 6 years in a row. The reason I'm giving all of these instances is that the way PSG is set up, they got to the finals. They got to the finals and lost in the finals to Bayern Munich. And so everyone expected them with all the stars that they bought, that they were going to be they've been knocking on the door, and finally Enrique has gotten it right. So Enrique reminds me of that moment where AC Milan had this period where they go on, and then after beating Barcelona in 94, they got to the finals again in 95 and lost to Ajax. This was the Ajax team that had Finidi George in Kwano, which was a moment we all celebrated. Milan, So the dynasties, first was Real Madrid in the 50s and 60s. Benfica was brief because Benfica also lost a lot of finals in that period. But so I'll add Benfica, in the 60s as a team in the 60s with all of those kind of run. Then in the 70s, it was between Ajax, Bayern Munich, and Liverpool. And then the 80s was Liverpool earlier, and AC Milan went through. AC Milan had something similar to what Real Madrid had in the 50s and 60s. Milan had it from late 80s into the 90s. The one team that keeps going to get into the finals and not winning was Juventus after they won the first one in 94. But then, that whole continent. And then it became difficult in the turn of the century. It became difficult after the 90s. Real Madrid came in a few times. They won in 98, they won in 2000, and they won in 2002. They never won it back to back that period. But that was the beginning of the Galacticos era when they had Zidane, they had Luis Figo, they had David Beckham, they had all of these big stars. They didn't have that. They couldn't put a run together. And then you had AC Milan returned when Ancelotti was coach. They got to several finals in the 2010s. They got to the finals. They lost to Liverpool in 2005. They'd beaten Juventus in the final previous, and then they beat Liverpool in another final. So Milan had their period when they were coming back. And then Bayern also, Man United had 1999 and 2008. Then they go to the finals again in 2009 and 2011. So Man United had a rebate, but then Real Madrid came back when they had their second round of Galacticos with Ronaldo, Gareth Bale. They called themselves BBC, which was Bale, Benzema, and Ronaldo. So that's another dynasty.
Yes.
Arsenal has an opportunity to stop PSG from establishing the dynasty because PSG has the resources to replenish this team. And if Enrique is thinking dynasty and he remains in this, because that team is young, the team is very young. He did something significant. Let all older guys leave and build a solid team. So they have the resources to sign more young players, and this could be the start of another dynasty. So I've taken my time to run through this Champions League. How would I put it? Odyssey, I guess. Yeah, for you to realize the moment that we're in. Mikel Arteta, this time around, you have the job of stopping the PSG. Otherwise, an Arsenal loss in the finals of the Champions League could dampen what they've achieved now, thinking back.
But so really, who would you say has? You've used the word dynasty a lot. Arsenal under Arteta, Paris Saint-Germain under Enrique. One of these teams has the opportunity to become a dynasty. But who does really have more pressure on them? Because again, Arsenal, on the back of finally winning the Premier League again, trying to win their first European Cup, or PSG, trying to prove that last year when they finally got the Champions League, that it wasn't a one-off thing. They were not going to have to see a thing where they come back. Maybe they get it back in 2 years or whatever, or they get it back, or they never see it again. This is it. We're taking this thing twice. So who does have more pressure on them?
The pressure is on us now because they for the fan base are going to be very hopeful and excited, but they have to be realistic. And on the one hand, they have the opportunity to look at what Chelsea did last summer at the Club World Cup, where Chelsea go to the finals surprisingly, and then everyone expected PSG to steamroll them. But what did we see? We saw Chelsea come up. Maresca came up with a plan, PSG, and they beat PSG 3. They scored 3. It was, for me, it was maybe one of the shock games, club finals that I've seen that would take me back to 94. Milan. Because when you have two really strong teams in the final, you expect a cagey game. You expect a game that's tight. So when I think back to AC Milan against Barcelona, I'm thinking this game should end by one ultra defensive. But they had a plan and they went. They first set up their team very solid defensively. So they neutralized Barcelona's attack. And then when they attacked, it became very difficult. This PSG, we've seen them, they barely have, weaknesses. They are very solid defensively, or very organized defensively. And in terms of the attack, they don't depend on just one player. They're like bees. They float in every direction, and somehow they get a goal. Even when you try and keep them barely quiet, somehow he gets there, or it's Due, or it's Bakola, or someone else popping up to score. With Arsenal, under Arteta, they won a cup final. They will be under a great deal of pressure. I hope that by this weekend they would have stopped celebrating the cup final and just wait for Monday, when if they win they can have a massive parade around London. But
Two trophies,
they just have,
Yeah,
they can celebrate two trophies. So they've got to be very, very focused on this game, because PSG is relaxed. They want, winning the French league is not a big deal for them. This season launch pushed them almost to the last two games before they won, but they did win. They're coming into this game mindful of the fact that when they got a bit complacent, Chelsea hit them. So they're going to be very, 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 very.
Yes.
It's going to be a different team. Both teams have played each other last season. It will be interesting to see. I expect a very good finals, and maybe Bukayo Saka puts on his Messi hat, like his Arsenal fans have been thinking. Maybe he puts on his hat, or maybe Declan Rice, pops up with a free.
Rice, that Steven Gerrard
Yeah,
hat.
or it's shot from outside. Or they get a set piece goal with Gabriel or someone else popping up there with a header. But PSG and Enrique know all too well what Arsenal are capable of doing. So
yes,
it's a game to look forward to. I am definitely confident that we're going to see a very, very interesting cup final.
Indeed. And now we will conclude with the prediction. No fence sitting, no diplomacy. Saturday night, Arsenal or PSG, who lifts the Champions League trophy. And you know what? Let's add a bonus challenge. What's the score?
Wow. I know I can be very, very good at predicting these things, but this is a very difficult one with difficult choice between my heart and my head. And my heart is not because I'm not a fan of any of those two teams, to be honest. My loyalty is in England, live with Liverpool. In France, I've always leaned towards Olympique Marseille for a while, and the PSG are the biggest fans. But with Enrique, I have a great love for. And here's the funny thing: Mikel Arteta is a former PSG player. So this is interesting. And I'm thinking about Arsene Wenger as I'm doing, because this is the one reason I really love Arsenal, apart from Kanu. So let's predict. I'm going to go for an Arsenal win, and I'm going to go for a 1-0 win.
Okay.
I hope I'm right, because this is.
I guess we'll see.
This is more like my head, but if PSG scores first, then PSG wins. But at the top of my head, I'm going for an Arsenal win, but they've got to stop PSG from scoring, because if PSG scores, then they are going to be. They will lose their head.
Yes.
Yeah, this is what I think will happen. I hope I'm right, for the sake of you Arsenal fans. It's not that I'm supporting you. I'm just doing what I do.
Look,
and what I've done.
You made it this far, right? And they made it this far, you might as well go all the way.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And just like that, Daddy-O, we are done. Thank you, Dad, for joining me. Thank you for joining us here. If you enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to leave a like, share the video, leave a comment, of course, subscribe to the channel. I'm Gifted Enyadike. This is my father, Emeka Enyadike. This is EEXSport Talk. We will see you next time.
Share you.